This is episode number 1, and this is all about my personal story. You're going to learn about the disease that I was born with and where we are in life right now. I'm so excited that I get to share my story. I'm just so grateful to have this opportunity. My story, it starts like any other story does. I was born almost 26 years ago, and I was born to first-time parents. They didn't know I was going to have a rare genetic disease. And so, yeah, it really, the whole entire journey was very interesting, to say the least. And really what had happened was I was born, and yet I had so many different challenges. There's so many doctors that just didn't know what it was exactly. One of the first things that they saw was sugars in my urine. And my mom, she knew that was not normal. And from the day I was born, she thought that something was wrong. And if you've met a mother, they typically know if something is wrong or right with their child. It was a journey of 3.5 years from me being born to the day I was diagnosed. And in those 3.5 years, I had many, many, many challenges. I had ataxia. I was hearing impaired. I didn't really speak all that well. I had cognitive delay. There were so many different things. And yet, I had 18 different doctors. I had many doctors, but no one knew exactly what it was that was wrong. They thought maybe I had cancer, and I saw an infectious disease doctor. There really were no answers. It wasn't until the day when I had a surgery of some sort, and the surgeon had come to get me before the surgery, and my mom had asked him, "Can you biopsy that?" And honestly, my mom had no idea about anything in the medical field. Just knew that we were always at the hospital. She really just blurted that out. I think there was a reason why she blurted it out now years later. So they took a biopsy of that, and so basically once the results came back, it was found that I had a glycoprotein storage disease called Alpha-Mannosidosis. Alpha-Mannosidosis essentially means that my body was deficient in one of the enzymes, the Mannosidosis enzyme, and that was actually causing a lot of challenges in my body. It affected every single cell of my body. And so this is a degenerative disease, so it made sense why I had so many challenges. And it really affects the whole entire body. And it gets worse and worse and worse. I forgot to mention in those first 3.5 years that I had a skull reconstructive surgery because it was also affecting my bones. Once my parents had that diagnosis, they were so excited because they finally knew that there was a reason why I had so many different challenges. And so when they had gotten that diagnosis, they were in a room of geneticists, and these geneticists, they basically tore off a piece of paper and gave ISMRD's website, which was, and it still is, www.ismrd.org. And they told my parents, these people, they know what alpha-mannosidosis is. And so we're going to do some research, and you're going to do some research, and we're going to figure out a plan. So then my parents went to ISMRD's website and connected with them, and they were able to get in front of some doctors and scientists at the World Symposium, which is this like really big symposium where all these different doctors for specifically lysosomal diseases get together. My parents now, when they explain this story, they're always like, yeah, we crashed World Symposium. And I laugh every time they say that. But they were able to find the answers that they needed. My parents, they found out that there was a treatment option for alpha-mannosidosis. There's not many treatment options for a lot of these rare diseases. And so they found that bone marrow transplants have the capability to stop the disease from progressing, because once someone goes through a bone marrow transplant, the enzyme that was deficient is no longer deficient. And so they they knew that this was an option, and they had seen what happens when someone doesn't go through with any treatment. And so they were like, yep, we're going to go through with the bone marrow transplant. The doctors were like, are you sure? Like, do you understand the risks that come along with a bone marrow transplant? And my parents were like, absolutely, we do, but we want to give her the best possible life. And so it was a year after I was diagnosed that I went through a bone marrow transplant. And this past October celebrated 21 years since that bone marrow transplant. Let me see where. Yeah, so I went through a bone marrow transplant at 4.5, and it was a successful transplant. Transplants have changed a lot since 21 years ago. There was a time period where I had to be isolated for 1 year. And so it was kind of like I was already prepared for COVID because I already went through that. My parents already had gone through that. But yeah, so I was in isolation for a little bit, and then I went through a lot of different therapies because my mom wanted to try anything and everything. We had no idea if things would be able to be reversed. We had no idea what the road ahead looked like, but we knew, they knew, my parents knew that if we just do anything and everything, there might be a better hope for my life. And so we went to a lot of appointments. I had a speech therapist. I did occupational therapy. We went to a lot of appointments. And so I did speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, equine therapy. Don't know if there's anything else, but those were like the major things that we really just went after. There were many years where in school I had so many challenges, primarily with my brain. Growing up, I had challenges remembering things, processing things, like processing the world around me. That was like a major thing because I always felt like people were talking too fast. I couldn't keep up with conversations. And yeah, like I had a lot of just brain challenges. I also had challenges if something changed. I had my way of life, and if something changed in my way of life, it turned into many crying fits, and they were not my most favorite times. And so there was a lot. And then even when I would come home from school, my parents would say that I would just start crying. And so when I was at school, I would be smiling all day, every day. But then I would come home and I would just be an emotional mess. And I think it's most likely because of just all of the brain challenges that I was having, because it looked like I was functioning well. It looked like I didn't really have anything wrong with me because I had that skull reconstructive surgery. Um, because typically with Alpha-Man, you have a wider forehead. But I think with the surgery that I had early on, that stopped that from happening. And so if you look at me, you don't see anything different. And that was one of the most challenging things that I had through my whole entire life, because everyone would be like, oh, she's fine, she's good, she's smiling, all this stuff, but it was just to cover up. Like, there, I learned how to smile so that people wouldn't ask me how I was. That was like a major thing, very major thing. Um, and so I went through all these like different therapies, and we had gotten to middle school, and I was still having all these brain issues. But my parents, they had found a program called Brain Balance, and it was formed by Dr. Robert Malillo, and he's done a lot of research in the brain and the two hemispheres of the brain and what happens when the hemispheres are not around like the same developmentally. And so I went through that program. So Brain Balance was more of like an academic center, but they also tied in food and then different exercises to help the brain just get to where it should be. And it was used for ADHD, some forms of autism, I believe, and just like other developmental delays. So my parents, they were like, oh yeah, let's try this. And honestly, after the program, like, I was very different. I was very different. Because after transplant for many years, I was always so tired and just didn't really want to do much after my busy school days. Um, yeah. And so, with that, I went through this program, and specifically like the foods thing, that was very challenging because they did an ALCAT blood test to see what foods the blood reacted to. When the results came back, I had 80 foods out of 100 that my body reacted to. So then it went into an elimination diet, and the elimination diet was definitely challenging because I had to take 80 foods out of my diet for, I believe, 6 months, and then you started introducing the foods back in. Luckily, my body can have most foods. A majority of those foods that I was not able to eat, I'm able to eat now. So I'm very excited. But after the program, I actually wanted to go out for the tennis team. I started running, and I also wanted to go out for the bowling team. And so at this point, I'm in high school. So I I made the tennis team, and then I also made the bowling team. This is my sophomore year of high school. And then towards the end of my sophomore year of high school, I was in a car accident. And everything that I had previously dealt with in regards to my brain came back. We were once again having many challenges after we had seen all of this improvement. I had brain issues at this point once again, but I also had back and neck issues because of the car accident. When the car accident happened, they kind of just really asked if we felt okay and like all that stuff. But they didn't do like a concussion test or anything like that. It wasn't months later until I found out that I had a concussion. And with that, I had a summer class that summer, and so I did a summer class with a concussion, and that did not help my brain whatsoever. Yeah, so there's a lot that just goes into that. But then, like, really after it, like junior year and senior year, I started having anxiety attacks, and then it went into a lot of depression and like suicidal thoughts and all of that. Once I graduated high school, I was almost hospitalized for the suicidal thoughts. I am grateful that I wasn't. In that time, I didn't want to take any medicine for all of the depression stuff that I was experiencing. I had a feeling that I would be able to like stop it. Didn't know how, but it was always like in I feel like it was in me that like I wouldn't need medication. I was always trying to like eat better, exercise, basically all of the self-help things that one can do. So the year after I graduated from high school, I actually went to church, and this happened because I was visiting my friend in Virginia Beach, and I was visiting her for the weekend. Her and her sister invited me out to church, and they didn't make me go. They were like, if you don't want to go, we don't have to go. And I was like, oh yeah, like let's go. Like I'm not gonna change your plans because I'm here. Like no, we can go. I am so happy I went to church that day because it it was a outdoor service, and it was a super fun service because we were at an amphitheater that was super close to the beach. Since we're in Virginia Beach, there's beach. But yeah, so we were outside, and it was just really cool. So it was like the first time like having church outside. This is just a little background information, but I grew up Catholic. I grew up going to CCD and going to church on Sundays with my grandparents, but as a young child, I had no idea what any of it meant. And after confirmation, I decided to stop going, and I didn't feel like it was for me. I didn't understand it. Yeah, so that that's where we were with that. So this was my first time going to church like outside. And during the worship part of their service, the Lord, he encountered me. He gave me a vision. And so that like I knew this was from him because it was something that I would have never been able to do on my own. Because of all of the brain challenges that I've had, I was never able to like imagine something like in my brain. I would always have to like look at an image to like draw it or whatever. I could never like freehand from what was in my brain because I just felt like I never had that function. And so when the Lord encountered me, he showed me this like vision that was like a video. It was really cool. And I can still remember it to this day. Praise the Lord. It was a video of like me being in the hospital. And I was just like smiling and waving. I had always wanted to remember something from when I was younger because I have no memory of my childhood. No memory of going through the bone marrow transplant, no memory of elementary school, no memory of middle school, like no memory. And so this was the first thing that I was like, oh my gosh, like there's something that I remember, like this is wild to me. And I was really, it was really intriguing, but at the same time, it was like really like freaky to me because I was like, what is this? What is this? And so my boyfriend at the time, I asked him, I was like, so this just happened, what is this? And he was able to I don't even know what he said, but um I was but he was the first person that I told. Um and I was like, well, I'm kind of wanting to go to church. And so we started going to church together. And I started learning about who Jesus was. I was in community and I was serving and like all the church things. But I was also at this time starting to read the Bible. And I found that as I started reading the Bible, the depression stuff was starting to slowly go away. It took some time for it to go away, but it was really just starting to go away. And so this was my first time experiencing really the power of God. And it was really just through reading the Word. And so that really started my journey on just becoming a Christian and slowly just learning more and more about the Christian faith and why Jesus had to come and die for us so that we could have eternal life with the Father. I'm gonna skip over some time and then I'm just gonna talk more about the brain. So I had mentioned previously how I was ready for COVID when that happened. In regards to the cleanliness and all that, but there was another part to COVID that I wasn't ready for. So when COVID happened and everything shut down, my brain also shut down. It was really just from the thought of all of the change and it disrupting my schedule. At this point, I was still having all of the brain issues because once the car accident had happened, all the brain issues came back, and yet they came back worse. And so I didn't even go into all the details of that, but I'll expand on it because it comes back into this. After that car accident, I had a lot of issues with eyesight, and then also headaches. And that was probably like the two like major new things that had happened. But I was still having difficulties with change. And so COVID changed everyone's world as we know it. It changed everything to be more online. At the time, I was in classes for my marketing degree that I'm about to graduate with in May, but my whole entire schedule got changed from being in person to being online. And the stress of all of this, it wreaked havoc on my brain. I like to say that my brain was malfunctioning because that's what it felt like. There were periods of times where this stuff was happening to me 24/7 and I couldn't stop it from happening. I was completely controlless with that aspect. And so I was experiencing what I would say my drunk phase. And yet I wasn't drinking at all. I've only had one little sip of wine and that's it in my whole entire life. And so I was laughing uncontrollably. My balance was off, very bad headaches. I was sleeping a lot. I was swaying. That's just a few things that I was experiencing. And so if you saw me, you would have thought I was drunk. And it did not go away right away. It stayed for quite some time. And yeah, like it was probably one of the most challenging times that I've ever had. And I'm so, so, so grateful that I was surrounded by community, by Christian community at my school. And I was actively just listening to the Bible because I couldn't read it because my eyesight was so bad. So I would just listen to it and I would find comfort and peace in it. And so that was 2020, and then a few months later in 2020, I had a dream, and this dream consisted of seeing myself with alpha-mannosidosis in a wheelchair, and I saw myself die, and then I saw myself come back to life. But when I came back to life, I had no challenges. And I did not realize that there could be dreams from the Lord. And so this was, I believe, one of my first dreams that really came from the Lord with what he was telling me that he was going to do. And yeah, so I was believing that he was going to completely heal me. I had no idea how this was going to happen. I was always hoping it was going to be a snap of a finger and a prayer and that I would be healed, but no, did not work like that. It was a journey, and the journey was completely from him. I started seeing a nutritionist in 2022, towards the end of 2022. And she recommended that I see a doctor. And this doctor was in the town that I lived in. I didn't want to complicate things when I started seeing my nutritionist. So we had put this doctor on the back burner. And then a few months go by, and my friends from church, I'm in their small group, they invite my mom and I out to a house church. And my one friend, she gives me the name of the person's house that we're going to. And this name is who I believe is the doctor that my nutritionist recommended. And so we show up at their house, and it turns out that he is the doctor that my nutritionist recommended. With that, I got to know the doctor, and then we made an appointment a few months later, and then a few months later after that, I was then in his office, and he did an eval, and he told me that basically everything was going to be okay, and that he believed that the Lord was going to heal me. He believed that my brain would no longer have the issues that I was experiencing at that moment in his office. And so I saw him for a little over a year, and then him and his wife moved, and then did not see him anymore. And it's been about a year and a half since I've seen him, and no issues with my brain at all. With that being said, the first time that I saw this doctor after the eval, I just went to the appointment, and it was for the first time where my body was able to relax. I never realized how my body was wasn't able to relax before. But I still remember he used a tuning fork, and that thing, oh my gosh, that relaxed me so much. And it was after he had done like a small adjustment to let my brain know what it was that he was doing. But yeah, it was a wild experience. I no longer have brain issues. And I can say, and this is my own journey, but I can say that all of the things have been reversed. Which is a miracle. It's something that I don't think anybody would have ever guessed would be able to happen. But it's exactly what the Lord showed me in that dream. And I knew that the doctor that I saw, I knew that he was also going to be my last doctor that I saw regarding Alpha-Mannosidosis. And I knew this because of a dream I had. And so that's my story. And now to wrap everything up, my life looks completely different than it did years ago. Even 2 years ago, it looks completely different. And I'm so excited to be able to have this podcast where I get to interview other people who have rare stories. And I have a blog where I share about my daily life post bone marrow transplant. I will be graduating in May with my bachelor's degree in marketing. I'm currently the ISMRD communications officer. I don't know where the Lord will place me, but I believe that nothing is impossible with Him. We'll catch you on the next episode of It's a Rare Story. Thanks for joining.